I will. Hello, everybody. Hi, everybody. We're going to start the event. Can everyone move close to the stage? Can everyone come up close to the stage? There's a lot of spaces right here. We'd love to see you so you can participate in the event. Mimi, everybody, Melissa. Okay. I'm going to call people out. Not yet. I'll invite you guys up, okay? Okay. Okay, we're going to start in 3 minutes. So please make your way up towards the stage. Okay, you guys, we're going to start. Okay, on the count of, let's go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle Carlson, and I am the chapter manager of Women in Localization Silicon Valley. And I also lead localization at SurveyMonkey. So welcome tonight. Tonight we have a wonderful marketing panel specifically around localization and transcreation. And this is our holiday event. So happy holidays, everybody. Okay, so tonight, this is our agenda. We already did some holiday networking, and we're going to continue with that after our marketing panel. And then we'll have a few chapter updates for you at the end, and then we'll go back and do some more holiday networking and wrap it up around 8. Okay? So first of all, I'd like to thank G and Box for hosting us. There she is, G. So G has been a great partner to Women in Localization and Box too. This is the second event in the last 2 years at Box. So thank you for supplying the food, the wonderful venue, and for just, your enthusiasm for Women in Localization. Thank you so much, G. We really appreciate it. Okay. So moving on to our talented marketing localization panel. I would like to bring up the panelists. If everybody want to come up. Okay, so first of all, I want to introduce to you Erica Hames. And Erica, Erica has a very long background working for Apple in marketing and global marketing. And she also is currently working for me at SurveyMonkey, woohoo! And doing marketing content for localization team. And she's going to introduce the rest of, she's also on the board at Women in Localization, I must say that as well, as one of the marketing directors. So with that, I'd like to have her introduce the panel.
Oh, hello. Hi. I'd like to introduce my wonderful panelists that we have here. Thank you, ladies, so much for coming. So, as Michelle stated, I have a background in marketing, but it's really mostly in globalizing content. And now I'm doing actual localization at SurveyMonkey, which is really interesting on marketing. So we're really a very diverse industry as localization, but also marketing is pretty diverse, which you're going to see today, as well as, you're going to see how diverse the marketing industry is in how they support localization. So I think we're all going to learn something today. It'll be really exciting. So I'm going to start by introducing Lisa Leary. Lisa Leary Perez, hyphenated. Now, Lisa and I work very closely together because Lisa is not only head of content and marketing at SDL, which is a software and localization service provider, and she is also the creative marketing officer of Women in Localization. She sits on our board. And I am the executive director of the marketing committee, so I kind of report to Lisa. Right. And so we work really closely together on marketing for our organization of 16 chapters. So it's pretty amazing. So thank you so much, Lisa, for coming. Now, Aki and I have a bit of a history as well. Aki is a creative director for a company called SY Partners here in the Bay Area. They're in San Francisco, and they are a design and branding firm that work on very strategic, fun projects, which you'll hear. But Aki and I used to work together when we both worked at Apple, and Aki was the creative director for our Japan office. So it's very interesting. She represents the country as well as has ran global campaigns. So it's very interesting. And then rounding out our panel is Claire Tsai. Claire and I met at Loc World in Seattle just last month, I would say. And Claire works for a company called Cloudflare, which is internet security company. And she runs globalization there. So I think you're going to start to see all these different aspects of marketing and how they touch our awesome industry. So let's get started. I'm going to try and get into this high chair. It's a little too high for me. Okay. I'm in. I was a little nervous about that. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I thought we would start by having each of you just describe your role at your company. So why don't we start with Lisa?
So I run all of the content and creative teams at SDL. So that writer, director, producer. I also have video teams. I have designers. I have writers. On top of that, I'm actually one of SDL's customers as well because I also manage all of the localization, corporate localization that we do at SDL. So I commiserate with many of you SDL customers. But I might actually be treated a little bit worse than you guys because I'm not officially a customer. Since I work for them, I can't fire them. I can't RFP, although I've threatened to RFP our local services.
Aki? Oh, push the button.
There you go. You can hear me. Okay. So I am a managing creative director with SY Partners. We are, how can I say? It's like a design and strategy consulting firm. I don't know you're familiar with what we are based in San Francisco and you have a New York office. So what we do is that we help organizations, teams, and leaders to actually transform to be better version of themselves. That's how we describe our job is. But where we start is about helping the company to define their purpose and mission, who they are, what they stands for. And that will help to drive the brand, and then that will help the brand drive all the expressions all the way down to whatever the marketing materials to communications. So we start with a very, very high top level, and then sometimes go all the way down to the every touch point, but also sometimes we stop up there. So I lead all the design team in San Francisco, and we closely work with the strategy team. And but our clients are all global firms, and also sometimes people are in local countries, but they're in a really in a different market. So I just came back from Abu Dhabi. We have a client in Abu Dhabi, so maybe I can tell you a lot of things I'm learning about the totally different culture there. But so I don't consider myself I'm doing a localization. That was actually my past job that Erica's talking about from Apple. But on the other hand, if you think about the bigger view of localizations, actually what we help is to set the tone of what the company want to show up, how they want to show up, and how they communicate. And then that will probably help to really making a decision of how much you're translating or how you're translating or how you show up in a different market. So in a way, I guess it all relates. So anyway, that's what I do.
Hello, everyone. I'm Claire. I work at a company called Cloudflare, based in Soma, San Francisco. What I do is I work with a group of very talented, a dynamic team on taking the Cloudflare experience global. So now we have offices in London, Singapore, Washington, D.C., and many other places. International expansion is a very special and also a top priority for the company because over 80% of our customers are actually based outside of the United States. So we realize it's very important for us to reach them and talk to them in the language or the culture that they understand and appreciate so that we can democratize the internet service and really help them use their internet service better and faster.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. So one of the first things I like to start with is I really want to hear from you how you define localization and how localization is defined at your company. I know Aki started that, so I want to start with you because your role is not considered localization. And I don't know that, you know, we never had that, you and I both have never really had that role, that title.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this a little bit, but maybe you can get down to, you know, if you, that reminded me that when Apple days, Apple decided to open the very first international store, the Apple Store, and the first place was in Tokyo. We had a lot of discussion with Steve that how much we should be translating. You know, is everything going to Japanese or keeping some of the English? Are we, changing all the contents? There's a lot of discussion because that's really first time doing is as Apple. And in the end of the day, Steve said we are California company. So California company is going to go into Japan. We will never be a Japanese company. So that will help us to decide. Okay, so in order to show up as a California company in Japan, okay, how much? Maybe you should keep the headline in English, but maybe we'll localize certain things so that people can understand who Apple is, but it will never completely change to turn into a very Japanese-looking company. So if you actually think that way, right, it's more importantly think about, okay, who you are, how you want to show up into different market. And also we help the company about diversity and inclusion. And if you actually think about how you want to show up to different market, and then how do you want a customer to feel that they feel like related to you or not? You have to actually think about the very top level to start with, and then you can make a decision about how much you're actually really translating, which level. Are you going down to just the language, or are you making all the way down to the contents, the photography, everything people see is going, to, it's all of those, you have to make decisions. And I think as a company, think about yourself, that who you want to be to show up in the different places, like as a global company to show up, or your American company happen to be in a different market. Those two decisions are very different outcome you're actually making. So that part of me that's the part that I do.
I do. I like that. I like that definition a lot. Claire, what about you? How do you define localization, and how how do you define it at Cloudflare?
Yeah, so we think about it as a more holistic experience. And so we kind of follow the customer journey, looking at how they interact with us at each different touch points, right? So whether it's they're just hearing about the Cloudflare brand and trying to research about what we do, what our product does. So it will be from different channels, Google, Baidu, Yandex, Yahoo, right? And once they land on our site, right, what is it that they need? What is the intent that they're trying to achieve here? So whether it's to buy or to try, right, or just do research or to share specific product offerings with their contacts, right? So I want to make sure that those experiences are fully localized and relevant to them, right? And once that's achieved, do they then download or they buy? So is the payment, right, method localized? Currency, right? A checkout experience. We know that, hey, e-commerce is really a hot topic these days. So how do you make sure that, hey, when you're working with a Brazilian customer, you're localized and with Boleto, and also for China, right? Are you supporting Alipay? Are you supporting WeChat Pay? So these are all the different experiences that we have fully planned and actually on the roadmap for next year.
I agree with that. What about you, Liesl?
I'm not. Yeah, I think this is working now.
Okay, good.
Okay, good. Sorry. Oh, believe me, I have no problems talking loudly. That's general. You can ask my kids. So my definition of localization has changed over the last 19 years. I've been in the industry, and what changed is the context in which localization appears. Because of the internet and the overwhelming amounts of content that's available nowadays, it's become far more important to be relevant to an audience than just their language. And so for me, it's not so much about localization anymore, it's about personalization. But in identifying that requirement to really be personal and relevant to every single person who's consuming content. Otherwise, they're just going to ignore it because there's so much content out there. You know, the most intimate part of personalization is what a language a customer speaks. And you know, you see a ton of research out there. CSA has published the stats about how, you know, if they can't read it, they won't buy it. In France, like, 70% of the people surveyed will not buy a product if it's not in their language. So, it used to be for me, because I had started off in localization at an ad agency type of model, that it used to be that if you could make the same impact in another language, then it was localized. But now I think it's actually a little bit more different than that, because to Aki's point here, there's different levels of localization. There's the photography, there's the imagery, there's even typography can make a big difference. Channel can make a big difference, especially in marketing. Some, for women in loc, when we were planning our social strategy, I kind of pushed for a global model, because you can't use Facebook or some of those other social media, channels in some of the Asian countries that we have, and we have chapters in Asia. So, we made the decision that we were, of course they can use WhatsApp or whatever they want to use. WeChat. Sorry, I can't remember anymore. There's a lot.
WhatsApp. They can use WhatsApp as well.
Yeah. Okay, but I mean, exactly. So that's localization is really about personalization. It's about making it relevant for that particular audience, and that's what my definition is now.
I think that's great, because we're really learning how we all align. But I want to actually, to your point, Liesl, and find out more about unique challenges that are just specific to your particular roles and companies. So Liesl, let's start. We're going to start with you. Where do each of you see the challenges in globalizing marketing?
For me, it's a volume issue. There's just so much content that needs to be created. And if you think about localization again as personalization, every single audience that we're targeting has to have its own special message. It's got to have its own language. It's got its, we may be talking to a different generation and maybe in a different way. We're talking to linguists differently than we're talking to enterprise TMS users. So just the volume of content is basically why I don't sleep.
Yeah, to me, I totally agree with the volume, but also more and more that people are moving around to different places. Nationalities are started merging. Like for example, I just came back from Abu Dhabi. It's interesting the place. I don't know how many people been there or familiar with, but that there is a 200 nationalities within the UAE, and that holds 80% of population there because those are immigrants. So if you think about, even though it's a language, the main language they speak is Arabic, but if you think about all these people you're dealing with, 200 different nationalities, and so how do you do that? How do you communicate to people that like that? So you can just say, oh, you're going to this country, therefore this is only where you do localization. Even Japan. I'm from Tokyo, and when I was doing the Apple work, if you go to Japan, okay, always all these audiences are Japanese people, so just do Japanese language translation. But recent years, I noticed that there is more Chinese people and Korean people living and also shopping in Japan, and many materials I started seeing is in a triple, 3 different languages out there, even in Japan market. So more and more than becoming very complex, and all this different nationality emerges. How do you dealing with that is, to me, is becoming very challenging.
And what about you, Claire?
Yeah. So for us, I think the main challenge is how can we be most effective in what we do. So as a startup or even at any company, right, there's always a finite amount of resources or even budget. And as we're just starting to expand into new markets, right, to be very smart and thoughtful about which channels to test first, what experience you want to launch, how much of a localization is enough. So we definitely followed industry research and understand, hey, can we actually cover 80% of the opportunities with only 20% of the content and also languages, and what are the top tier languages that actually covers most the market and opportunities. So I think it's a constant discussions with our internal teams, understanding our customer intents and needs, and comparing that with the internal data that we're seeing, and really be agile and very responsive to market needs and constantly reiterating on the campaigns and localized experiences.
So what I'm hearing is having very strategic decisions on what you can and cannot localize. And it pertains to the market and the consumer. Now, in our audience here, we have people who work in localization and a lot of people who work with translations. So what we're hoping is maybe you can tell us some specific tips that you want them to know about marketing content. Some things, maybe some hot tips on what's different about marketing content that's special. So why don't we start with you, Claire?
I think my tip, or at least for my experience, really understanding the business, right? How do you measure success? What is it that the customer needs, and how do you measure that? So from a campaign perspective, we're running an ad, right? So we're definitely looking at conversion or click-throughs, right? So how do we take that number and make sure we're constantly iterating and optimizing the business metric so that it's helpful for the business?
Yeah, to me is that rather than just, okay, you got a piece of text and you need to translate, like more about, think about outcome, what kind of impact do you want to give to your audiences, and then decide what the best way. For example, I still remember like one of the hardest line we have to translate in Japanese was when Apple launched this first MacBook Air. The headline was innovation. And so it's basically made up words of thin and innovation. So that was, really smart for English language, but what do you do? So it's, but on the other hand, what type of things you want to communicate? Therefore, you have to kind of come up with new ideas to put in the market rather than just a direct translation, which didn't really work anyway. So I think it's more about, what kind of things you want to hopeful to put to people to take away. And then, I mean, there are a lot of set of things that can be very easily translated, but a lot of like most impact part is actually much harder. So, yeah.
I kind of want to combine their two answers because I think there's actually something here that I didn't realize until I became a localization customer how difficult A, the job was, but B, because I had been a marketer, how useful the marketing metrics were for proving my localization case. And so if I were only a localization manager at this point and not both localization and marketing, I would be buddying up with the marketers because they have metrics that can actually be useful to proving localization business cases. So for instance, to your point about measuring impact and seeing the outcome of how a campaign is performing in a particular market. And in fact, this was so powerful, we actually ended up building multilingual A/B testing into our latest launch of Tridion, which is a content management system, just so it would make it easier for localizers to prove these pages that have been machine translated are performing better in these markets, and therefore we should actually localize that actually with a human. Those are the kinds of combinations that I think are oftentimes missed because we keep localization away from marketing. But when you move them together, they're actually far more powerful in showing the impact that localization has on the bottom line. And that is, I think, something that we've all been struggling with. I don't think any of our business owners actually care about translation memory reuse, truthfully. I don't even think they understand it. I mean, I actually have a stat that proves that. But when you start talking about the fact that these customers in these marketplaces are actually reacting far more, favorably to our site because it's localized, that's when they start paying attention.
So with that, I'd like to actually start talking about maybe something fun, like a fun story that we have, which may have been painful at the time, but is there a particular campaign that you remember that was very challenging to globalize? I think maybe we'll start with Aki, because I know you had the inspiration, right?
Yeah, well,
Innovative.
like all these memories keep coming back to me. But well, try to think. I think it's another, another story was when Apple was launching the iPhone 3G. So that was the second generation of the iPhone, and then 3G was a big deal in US, but Japan was already moving into 4G. So 3G wasn't necessarily new news. So it's a more like a beyond the translation. Really, actually, it's a strategic level that you can't just bring that to say it's a brand new thing. And we had a massive conversation around it. But in the end of the day, Steve wanted to have all same message everywhere. So Japan marketing couldn't win, and we went with brand new, most powerful 3G, iPhone.
Last year's technology.
Yeah, and that was, I have to say that wasn't greatest moment, but sometimes that's the decision I have to go. So coming down to it, not just about also language, what's relevant into the market, and then that becoming very, very tricky. Yeah.
And Liesl, do you have any fun war stories that you can share with us?
I mean, she's telling stories about Steve Jobs, and I'm feeling kind of insecure here, but okay, I will tell you one story. So about 3 years ago, I was part of the team that actually rebranded all of SDL. SDL is has a 25-year history. We had a lot of brand equity in our logo, which I don't understand because my reaction and everybody's reaction on the brand team was like, is that a planet? And like, if that is a planet, that's what our old logo used to look like. What planet is it exactly? And what the hell does that have to do with language services at all? And so that's how the asterisk actually, which I'm very proud of, but I can tell you right now, there was a lot of arguing that went on with this stupid asterisk. A lot. But yeah, we're super proud of it because it actually makes sense for, it doesn't mean, by the way, SDL terms and conditions apply. Although that might be true. It's more meaningful than that. So.
So my experience is a bit unrelated to like actual localization and translation, but a huge learning in terms of launching a successful international campaigns that I feel like it takes a village, right? A lot of times working with cross-functional teams, and it's actually my experience from my previous life launching a marketing campaign in China, and we were really proud of what we did with the translation. Everybody like signed off on the copy that it was like really like the best work that we could deliver. However, we're not seeing traffic go up. It was just like engagement was really flat. And later on, we found out it was actually some bits of the content right on the site, whether it's a social sharing widget or some video content platform, was actually being blocked in China, right? So yeah, the afterthought. So I think the huge learning from that is just, always checking the experience, post-launch items, talking to your customers, making sure that, hey, you're able to access the content. The other example that we had was we recently launched a Spanish site for Latin America. However, traffic did not go up. And later on, we realized that, hey, it's actually working with the SEO team closely to make sure the href actually is properly declared in all language settings. So again, it just highlights the importance of cross-functional collaboration. Always over-communicate and double-check your work.
So it sounds like you need some partnerships going on when you're localizing content. And now the next question I want to ask, I'm going to start with Lisa, but in every conversation, we're all talking about artificial intelligence, AI, machine translation. So what are your thoughts on AI actually replacing humans when creating, in creating copywriting? Can machines really replace creativity?
Okay, so I have a lot to say about this one, but I'm going to keep it short. I have a creative team. I have writers. I have Emmy award-winning videographers. We have a very creative team. Obviously not quite to the same level as Apple, but still pretty creative. And at the beginning of this year, I actually went down and spoke to our machine learning department in Los Angeles. These are all we have like 40 PhDs working on machine translation and whatnot. And the reason we went down there, actually, and this is the thing that I think a lot of people miss in the localization industry, is that machines are not replacing humans. Machines are actually enhancing the ability of humans to produce. And in my case, I was sort of like, I have this issue of not producing enough content. We actually have to create, variations on our content. We have to split them up into smaller and smaller pieces because it's no longer, when I started in localization, I think we were manually counting by hand the number of words that were in a PDF brochure. And that, does anybody remember Prep and Pour? Yeah. Okay, yeah, right? Okay, so that's how long I've been in this industry. And we didn't have InDesign, we had Quark, okay? And yeah, see, all the creatives laugh because we all know how shitty this product was. But not only did we have Quark, but if you were localizing into Japanese, you had to find someone who was Japanese to actually use the Japanese version of Quark. Yeah, you couldn't just hot swap the languages in. So that was the extent of content when I started in localization, okay? Nowadays, there's the brochure, there's the data sheet, there's the video that goes with there's the infographic, there's the social post, there's the blog post that goes in addition to that. Then there's the PowerPoint slides that you have to have because the sales team needs to be able to sell it. Then you have to have the write-up and the battle cards and the sales enablement. And that's just like half of the stuff that we have to create. So when I went to the machine learning group, it was I need a translation memory, but for content. Not to translate, just to know what shit we wrote before. Because I don't actually remember. I don't know if anybody else here remembers, but there's tens of thousands of documents that my group has actually produced. So to that end, we actually launched just recently at Connect, which is our annual user conference, Content Assistant, mostly because I complained long enough. and they finally decided that this was maybe worth the time and effort to do this. And it's been a really great tool. So, as I relate that back to linguists, you can't be afraid of AI replacing your jobs because that's not what they're going to do. It's going to help increase your productivity, and it's inevitable in the same way that it was inevitable that robots, changed the way that automakers produced cars in Detroit, right? The ones who are the most successful are the ones who are able to kind of transition into a changing dynamic. The ones who are least successful are the ones that said, "Oh, I'm not going to change. The quality is going to be too bad for a machine." It's not. Those are the people who ended up without jobs. So I think it's fair to say that we should embrace artificial intelligence. It's already here. This isn't a theoretical future. I mean, it's here. I know because I helped create it. So.
But now, as Aki, you create wonderful things every day. So, do you feel threatened at all by AI coming in, and or do you use it to enhance what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, and I think we can't really stop the progress happening, and I think we need to be, as a human, much more smarter way to how do you use that to take advantage of yourself, and then you can actually now, instead of taking all time to translate all of this volume, maybe get 50% or even 60% done by machine, and then you can enhance it, and then you can spend extra time for other things that you can do to make the things better. So I think it's more and more that gives more us opportunity to do interesting things or go beyond what you wanted to do but you couldn't do before because you have so much other things that you need to get done. If the machine can help you to do that, and now you can go one extra further. So if you think that way, I think it's much more interesting and more opportunities for us. I'm more optimistic.
Oh, I like that. Claire, what about you? You're running global campaigns as
I
well.
think we've been seeing some really promising technologies emerging these days. Some smart suggest and sentiment analysis, confidence scorecard, etc. And innovation and testing is in our DNA. So we're definitely very open to testing these technologies. And from my experience, this is not just about machine translation or machine learning, right? To develop the machine that helps getting the translation tone closer to our brand guidelines. But also, I think there's opportunity to combine our own firsthand data to make predictive decisions on, hey, which content, which translation based on historical data or customer user behavior, how that is going to perform, right? So even before we launch, you can already have a confidence score, whether it's gonna, reach certain amount of users in certain markets. I think that's an opportunity. So we're definitely very hopeful.
Actually, just to add to that too. I mean, what Claire is saying is different than I think what a lot of people are concerned about, because AI's potential isn't just for machine translation. That's just one part of AI. What AI can really help with is a lot of the roadblocks to localization, where decision points are made. So, for instance, A/B testing, right? If you know this is performing well automatically, you can automatically get that sent to translation. It's automating some of these roadblocks even faster than what we had before. And that's where the real potential is, I think, moving forward.
So enhancing what you already do, moving things faster. So, and you're not afraid of it, so that's good. Don't be afraid. So I'm going to ask one more question and then open up to questions here in the audience. So overall, if you are, we want to give you sort of a scenario. We want to know what your recommendations would be for a campaign for your top markets. So let's say you had a top 5 markets, your biggest selling markets. What would your strategy be around translation, transcreation, original copywriting? Would you have a balance of both? Would you stick to translation? Just sort of interested to know, do you think it's a balance? What would be your major strategy behind these campaigns? Why don't we start with Claire? What do you think?
In terms of transcreation, I think, yeah, definitely it's a huge opportunity. And in some markets, these things just don't translate literally, right? Like in our campaign marketing copy, supercharge your website. How do you translate into Chinese or Japanese or even Arabic? Does that concept actually exist, right? So finding different ways to describe, and also measure the effectiveness and really document that well in the creative briefs or brand briefs, make sure that the linguists are helping us deliver the same, effectiveness.
Yeah, I like that. And also, I think if those are really important market, I think it's rather than try to translate, it's more just to give same creative brief to the people that are in the market, and then have them to actually really come up, what I mean. Need to, yes, strategically align, but more about going towards impact and outcome, and then be creative about it, because I think it's a lot of really unique headlines are really hard to translate most of the time, because it's all culture related to, or just very specific to the certain market, and that's why it's very powerful sometimes. That's a really tricky one to just to translate, because it ended up very flat if you go to different markets. So yeah, I think it's more, definitely combination, but I think it's really top level, the messaging could be much more creative. And then maybe, whatever certain levels down can be pretty simple, straightforward.
So this is, I think, an opportunity for the local industry because, in my position, as I said before, the volume of the content is so intense that you can't possibly produce all the variations you need in all of the languages. And so what I ended up doing with some of my campaigns is that to your point, I actually would create the creative brief. I've actually sent it over to our in-country offices because we have a marketing solutions group. And our in-country offices have been the ones that have been responsible for proliferating all of the different content types that we need for every campaign. That's actually been far more successful for me than trying to, do all of the creative ourselves, and especially when you need 700 pieces, which is what we ended up doing for Under Armour, and we had to do that in like 10 languages, but well, I didn't, but the creative, the marketing solutions group had a good time with it. So, I think that we aren't leveraging the LSPs enough, or LSPs aren't offering this enough, because if you're trying to scale creative content, you really need people who are in country who understand what that content is saying to that audience, and really touching that, the zeitgeist, so to speak, for that.
So more collaboration, flexibility, agility, I think you mentioned as well, Claire. So thank you, three of you, so much for answering our questions, but I want to know if there's any questions in the audience.
Hi, thank you, ladies. I just had a question kind of to piggyback on what you were just discussing in the last question, because I always think of, especially for a company that does have the resources, like an enterprise, how much sense does it make to invest so heavily in localization for such a thing as marketing, as opposed to, source it locally? And especially like, as Lizzle was saying, there's so much content type that needs to be produced, but for some markets, some content type is not even needed, right? So what's the point of localizing it? So what's the decision-making process, or what's the rationale for still localizing things? Or is it better to just source local marketing locally? I don't know. I always question that in my head.
For me, it's really about how much time do I have to manage dealing with in-country agencies. It's easier for me to just go to one person, and then again, I don't have a choice because it's SDL, so I have to use the SDL Marketing Solutions Group. But actually, a lot of people use them. They're actually quite good, and so for me, it's just easier for me to go to them and say, I have one account manager, and I say, I need it in these languages. Can you go deal with all of that? And they do it well. I don't think everybody is set up to do that because not everybody has in-country offices that are wholly owned. In my case, it's just far simpler for me to do that than anything else. I just don't want to deal with agencies in country.
Yeah, what I learned from my Apple days, it's been for a while, so it might be different today, but there is a different tiers of the market, right? So, top market and also next tier down. It's really based on your business strategy and how much you're actually investing into the market, and you have a return. And then you can decide how much you actually put the resource against those market, if that makes sense. And then also it depends on the product, right? If you have a lot of confidentiality around it, you want to have your actual own team to manage that list or make or do stuff internally. But if you're not that so confidential, you could also have a partner. But I think it's you still need to have somebody on the ground that responsible in your side to manage the agency, because it's really just a throw into the agency and then hope best to come back, but it's always tricky.
I think the keyword here is prioritize, right? So looking at your total addressable market size, market growth potential, revenue, and individual channel experience, performance, right? And making sure you're constantly measuring the performance and upgrading and downgrading certain markets, certain channels, or even content types.
Hi, thanks for the panel. It's been great. This question is for Liesl. Liesl, I saw the presentation for the content assistant at SDL Connect, and I love it. And I was wondering, the regions also make unique content that is local, generated there. I was wondering if that tool will also, and maybe not now, because I think it's still beta, right? In the future, will also help to generate content in language, not a translation, but looking at all the content and being able to help regional marketers.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. I think a lot of people just, when they think about machine learning, they're only thinking machine translation. But realistically, we have developed something more along the lines of linguistic AI, which is a different type of machine learning than just machine translation, which means that you can actually create content, not just translate it from a source. And you can do that now with neural, right? You couldn't do that with statistical because it was, a one-for-one type of framework. But now you have an artificial intelligence that's actually learning the language and also creating language as a result. So absolutely, in the future, they're definitely working on that. And I don't know how quickly that's going to ramp up because we're still in beta for just content. I mean, I'm selfish. I need my problem solved first. But for sure that the technology is there and it's getting better and better as time goes on. So I absolutely expect that will be something that we will see.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
This is a question for Claire. You briefly touched on the customer journey, and I was wondering if you could bring examples of what Cloudflare has done to map the customer journey, and any specific examples where you've seen the, let's say, American customer journey for the American user diverge from the one for your non-English speaking customers.
Yeah, I would say we're still very early stage in terms of international customer journey mapping, right? So we're actually just following what US has done and taking that globally and testing different experiences, right? From awareness to research to trial to buy and become loyalty and brand ambassadors. So I think there's definitely the key here is really understanding which content types, channels actually map to different customer journey phases and constantly reiterating the experiences. But I think as we gather more data, right, market performance will be able to learn more and really develop a more international focused funnel.
Okay, at this point, I want to thank the panel. It was fabulous, and so everyone give them a round of applause. You guys can step down. Thank you so much. I have a couple of chapter updates that I'd like to do. Oh, there you go. Get a picture. So we're wrapping up what is the year? 2018. So it's been a fantastic year. We had 4 great events. We had all of these sponsors: Box, Mozilla, Moravia, eBay, SurveyMonkey, and High Tech Passport. We had greeters. We had photographers volunteering. We had 29 speakers, 29 mentors and speakers. That is amazing. So I am like, these are all the list of all the wonderful people that spoke and mentored at our events this past year. So I want to thank, if any of you guys are in the crowd, thank you so much. And it was such a meaningful year. And I hope all the chapter members really enjoyed it, really got a lot out of it. So I'm very proud of our organization. And I'm really proud of what we did in 2018. So wonderful. So at this point, I would like to thank all of my Silicon Valley leaders. You guys want to stand up? The Women in Localization Leadership Team for Silicon Valley. So Hannah, where's Hannah? Oh, Hannah, Sabine, Kiara, Yasmin, and Magdalena. You guys are amazing. In the last 2.5 years, we've grown our organization to more than 650 members, and that is incredible, coming from around 75 in the last 2.5 years. So we're really, really proud of our progress, and we're really thankful for all the members and all of the effort that everyone, our sponsors and everyone, has put into all the events. And at this point, I would like to introduce Kiara. Do you want to come up? Or just at least you can wave either way. So Kiara, after 2.5 years of being the chapter manager, I am stepping down. And I'm leaving Women in Localization Silicon Valley in the very good hands of Kiara Fonacero. And Kiara has been with the leadership team for almost a year now. She also works and leads localization at WhatsApp. And she's bringing lots of enthusiasm and organizational skills and motivation to the job. So I'm very, very happy to leave it with Kiara. And in next year, in our first event, she's going to introduce to you not only some of the existing leaders that we have in our leadership team today, but also some new ones that are joining the leadership team. So we'll be introducing those new ladies in 2019 in our first event. So I want to thank everybody for tonight. Enjoy the rest of the half an hour we have together, and talk to each other, get to know each other, and help each other be better leaders in localization. Thanks, everybody.